will seek to address key opportunities presented by current global challenges. It will focus on the future, a future that is being shaped now, and to which the concerted efforts of the partners at this summit can contribute. Panel. Our moderator, Mr. Abdou Diop, Chair of the Africa Committee of the General Confederation of Enterprises of Morocco and partner in Mazars. Ayad Mazour, Minister of Trade and Industry of the Kingdom of Morocco. His Excellency Alan Kire Martin, Minister of Trade and Industry of the Republic of Ghana. The Honorable Dana Banks, Special Assistant Advisor for the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. And representing the American and African private sectors, Temitope Iluyemi, Procter & Gamble's Senior Director of Global Government Relations for the Africa region, and Farouk Gumel, Group Executive Director of Tropical General Investments Group.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, honorable ministers, head of industries, I'm at this important closing session. We have had really nice days of discussions thanks to this fruitful partnership between Corporate Council on Africa, the government of Morocco, and the private sector, specifically CGM. And I am really honored to have the responsibility of this conclusion session, this closing session, with these distinguished panelists. I'll have the heavy duty to moderate, and we'll try to have an interactive discussion between us. It will be a session where I'll raise some challenges and try to have the views. We have the African public sector, we have the US represented by Ms. Banks, and we have also the private sector of the both sides. So let's see how we'll move forward together, as the topic is building forward together the future. And that's why we are here. So to begin, we have gone through years. The pandemic was here, all of us facing these challenges, and then all these wars. So today, many issues: hunger, sovereignty, industrial sovereignty, medicine, all these health issues, and we are facing that together. So my first question will be around this topic. Which solution, and private sector from the US and Africa, which solution to face those challenges? We have been discussing a lot. How can we build this future together? How can we create this dynamic to all these issues? And I'll begin with our host, Mr. Minister of Trade and Industry, my friends, dear Riyadh. So it's your turn to start the discussion.
Thank you, Abdou. And the first solution is in the mistake you made in my title. I'm not Minister of Trade and Industry, but I'm Minister of Industry and Trade. We should produce.
Sorry. Okay. Produce to sell, you're
produce to sell. This is the first solution to our challenge. More than that. So we came here and we gathered together facing a situation in a relationship between US and Africa that is not the best solution, that is not the solution that trade relationship dropped by 50% in the last 12 years, and this is not what we want. This is not what we need. Africa is exporting more and is importing more, but the relationship and our trade relation is not at the level we want. And we're having challenges, and behind each challenge we have opportunities. So if we have challenge on food security, for example, and we have a region where we gather food from, where it's more difficult or not so easy to gather food from it now, regarding the situation, and at the counterpart, we have 80% of the arable land that is not used, and not cultivated, and not valorized in Africa. So this is a huge opportunity for investors. It's a huge opportunity for investors, and we see it now. We have more interest, more investment interest to valorize this land. For health security, the same. We were facing a dramatic where vaccines or masks were changing destinations in the airport. I mean, it was incredible. And we are facing this situation and investing, and Morocco is investing in one of the biggest vaccine plants in Africa, $114 million a year. So every challenge opens an opportunity. So Africa has been probably the forgotten continent for ages. But it has 17% of the population, but more than that, it has 30% of the youth. And this is the real value. This is where the talents are. This is where the workforce is. This is where the future and the actual workforce is. So you cannot bring them all to the US, and you cannot bring them all to Europe or elsewhere. We don't want to give them all to you. We gave some in history, but we want to keep what we have now to valorize our continent. We have a plan. We have a good plan. We build it by our own, and we want America to participate in it. So America, the US, redimensioned, more efficient, but we need to do more. We need to target, we need to de-risk. It's good that we had hundreds of US companies being here. And to this US company, don't think to Africa only as a market. Don't think to Africa only as raw material you can value.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for this scene setting. I'll move to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ghana. Mr. Minister, yes. So you are in the heart of this cooperation. How can we create this better together?
Thank you very much, moderator. And let me follow my colleague in very respectfully. I'm the Minister for Trade and Industry, not Foreign Affairs.
Oh, sorry.
No, you know, just for the record, before somebody says that the minister was here usurping the powers of his colleague. So basically this. But I think that nobody ever wished for such a global calamity as COVID, and then subsequent to it, the Russian-Ukraine war. But I think that it is an indictment on the entire global, allowed ourselves to be stampeded into a situation where a fight between two countries is leading the world to a recession. And I think that the United States and Africa ought to use this as an opportunity to redefine our mutual engagement and determine how we are going to work together to lead this post-COVID recovery effort globally. And we all know that the United States and Africa have deep fraternal relations dating back for decades based on shared values, common respect for humanity, and many other things. But although a lot has happened between I would say the two continents, I believe that we have not been able to optimize the value from this relationship. And I believe that this is the turning point for us to do so. And if it's going to be a new beginning for us, then I'd like to propose 4 things. First, the United States is what it is, not because of the strengths and resources of their individual states, but the collective strength of the United States of America. And it's the same way the United States, Africa's strength does not lie in Ghana, in South Africa, in Nigeria, operating as individual countries. The strength of Africa lies in our collective strength, the United States of Africa. And I think that now that we are trying to forge a new strategic partnership between the United States and Africa, the United States must support the integration of the continent and not operate with the basis of individual countries on a selective basis. Already, it's taken us quite a bit of time for us as a continent to move on this path of a united Africa. Now we are there, and I think that the United States must work on a new strategic partnership. In 2000, when AGWA was introduced, this was the first landmark legislation between Africa and the United States, which in itself is very unfortunate. But be that as it may, AGWA was introduced. It's played this role. But just as my colleague minister was trying to change the way he was referred to from trade and industry to industry and trade, our relationship, trade or access to the US market, but on investment. It is based on investment that you enhance your capacity to trade. And with investment will come technology transfer. The role that the United States has played in empowering China to become the factory of the world, those same conditions can be replicated by now making sure that US investments, particularly from the private sector, drive our relationship. And then the trade would follow. Thirdly, is infrastructure. The divide between Africa and the rest of the world is an infrastructure divide because we control literally all the strategic mineral resources. We have the most extensive, and yet we are the poorest. And it is because of the infrastructure deficit. So one major proposal that needs to be looked at is how the United States, in our new strategic relationship, can develop a Marshall Plan for infrastructure development for Africa. And this is not to devalue the excellent work that MCC, AID, all the agencies have been doing. I'm now talking about moving our relationship to a new level, and infrastructure is going to be very important. Last but not the least is making sure that infrastructure is going to be very important. Last but not the least is making sure that we put small and medium enterprises at the center of this new strategic relationship. Because we know from the experience of the United States, that is what made the difference. I think that in Africa, that is what will make the difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for this clear point you are raising. And I'll turn to Honorable Dana Banks. I think each of our ministers are calling for a way of doing this relation in the future. And what are your thoughts and what are the positions of the U.S.?
Thank you, moderator, and thank you, Mr. Ministers. I want to say you didn't get my title wrong. I'm neither a Minister of Trade and Industry nor of Foreign Affairs, but it really is a pleasure to be here today. So I think both of the points that you hit on and that you touched on as well are an answer to what we were discussing about infrastructure and how that really is the next level of engagement and investment really needed to unlock the potential for trade and investment on the continent. I think the one thing that the pandemic has shown is how interconnected our fates are, our futures are together. To that end, you know, this administration, the Biden-Harris administration, has made sure that when we talk about infrastructure, we mean many things, but one of them certainly is health security, building health systems and security, vaccine manufacturing on the continent, and then coming in with the financing tools that we have at our disposal to help with that, such as Development Finance Corporation, who has partnered to close deals around the continent in South Africa, in Senegal for production and manufacturing and research and development as well in vaccine manufacturing. And DFC, MCC that you discussed, Mr. Minister Chair Martin, are a part of the Prosper Africa initiative. That's what Prosper Africa does. It's 17 U.S. government departments and agencies who really bring to bear all of the resources available to the from the United States government to investors who wish to invest on the continent to really help and promote those types of deals that we'd like to show that demonstrate our interconnectedness, but also to address issues such as food security, health security, as well as digital connectivity, addressing the gender divide, supporting women-led businesses, as well as young leaders, and health systems and health security. To that end, one last point, I see we have to wrap up. President Biden did officially launch at the G7 summit last month the Global Infrastructure Partnership Initiative, PGII, our way of building together with countries around the world, with lower and middle income countries, to bring to bear our resources as the U.S. government along with the strength of the private sector. So I encourage those members of the U.S. private sector here who want to invest on the continent but need the support of the government to consider PGII as one tool that we have to mobilize the financing for development projects, for infrastructure projects on the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Banks, for this insight on all these initiatives that have been taken to create that they are already working, because there are some investments that are already there. So after hearing from the public sector, we'll have some views of the private sector, and we have the chance to have a US actor, but also an African private sector. So I'll first turn to build a better future together.
Thank you very much, and once again, thank you for inviting the voice of the private sector to this conversation. And I can already see that, you know, the private sector is looking for, so that convergence is already happening. The Honorable Minister from Ghana had talked a lot about improving the integration within the continent and the support of the US government for the implementation of the AFCFTA. Now, of course, during the pandemic, we've seen all sorts of challenges and shortages, I mean, particularly within the supply chain. I can 100% jump in our logistic costs just in the last 1 year because of all the challenges, not to even mention the Ukraine-Russia war. So, you know, it goes without saying that we need to strengthen sourcing within the continent, but more importantly, we need the support of the US government to support the implementation of the AFCFTA. As an American company, it's going to help us use the comparative advantages of the different countries we work in so that we can deliver the best value across the continent, and then, of course, back to our parent company as well. So this is very important to us. But then on the US side as well, why this is also very important is there are several bilateral agreements African countries, but it will be a much bigger scale to have it can be the precursor to a much bigger trade and investment arrangement between US and Africa. So we see that as a great enabler. The second thing I have here is increased trade and investment promotion between the two continents. So you've heard the saying from African governments that we want trade, not aid. Okay, so we believe that having more and more trade and investment opportunities and discussions between the two continents will actually help to close the gaps that we have that we see today. I'll give you an example. Produce as close as possible to our consumers, and that's why we have situated our plants in strategic places. But we don't just do that. We then invite our suppliers around the world. We organize supplier summits in partnership with the government and the private sector. We run these supplier summits, and then we attract more and more industries into the various countries that we operate. And lastly, it's also been mentioned here by Ms. Dana Banks on giving technical assistance. So, for instance, including SMEs within the value chain. We run an SME academy, which is aimed at improving the capabilities of the SMEs that we work with or don't work with, so that they can be at standards where they can integrate into global value chains like ourselves, and thereby, expanding the prosperity of SMEs and businesses across the region. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tope, for this specific and clear action call for the public and private sector. I'll turn to Mr. Gumel to jump in and add something. Mr. Gumel, you are in the business in Africa and working across the continent. What is your views on that?
Thank you, and good afternoon. I think the first thing I would start with is, before we talk about infrastructure and monetize progress by calling numbers, the first thing that is critical is building the intangibles, the brain power, people's ability to deliver. Whether it is good, whether it is services, it is very important, first of all, to build that capacity. And I say this because in our group, we straddle West Africa. I chair one of the largest banks in Nigeria, but at the same time, I chair one of the largest rice mills in Nigeria. So one day I'm sitting in a building that has 26 floors overlooking Lagos, and then the next day I'm in the factory in rural Nigeria where the tallest building is 1 story. And therefore the challenges that happens there and the requirements that the people have in those locations are completely different. And so when we sit down and we talk about Africa, it is fantastic to say it, but it is 54 countries, 41 central banks, and 43 currencies. So where do you start? You start by getting Africans to understand Africans first, before we now start to get the Americans to understand Africa and its intricacies. Now let me give you a very good example of why I'm talking about the people first before you get to public or private partnerships. As a group, we try to do corporate social responsibilities, which is similar to some of the interventions of the past that happens from the West into Africa. It's more or less seen as aid and support. And we went to one of these rural communities and we had a meeting with them about how we're going to build their schools and enhance the quality of their educational systems. And everybody clapped. It was fantastic. I felt really touched by the reception we got. But as I was walking back to my car, they grouped together and they were talking, and then one of them just ran to me and he said, "Excuse me, can I just have a word?" And I said, "Yes, of course." He said, "Do we have a say?" And I said, "Sure." He said, "If we have a say on how is, can you put a fence and a drainage around our cemetery in our village?" And I said, "Why?" He said, "Because it's in a valley, and whenever it rains, the water washes the graves, and it becomes shallow. It does not come and interfere, because all of us are going back to that cemetery one day." And I thought to myself, gosh, these people every day sleep thinking, how does somebody do this? And all of us come with our own ideas of how we think they should progress. So first of all is, let's get the people to understand each other. And it starts by the intangibles, the brain power. Whether you want to build SMEs, whether you want them to connect with American SMEs, that brain power has to work. If you buy a $40 million factory to a country, you have to import people to come and run those machines, because there's no way you are going to go and hire somebody who has never done it before to manage a $40 million equipment. That is just the reality we are facing today. So in my rice mill, I had to get 40 Indians to move into a village that has never had a 9-to-5 situation and train 200 locals, of which now we have 40 qualified out of those 200 running the biggest rice mill in Nigeria. So collaboration first must be a connection of the brains, an understanding of how those brains will deliver value, and from value we'll get you.
Thank you very much for this comment and raising out, as it was said also by the minister, the importance of talent and people, but also the importance, as we have done the term, the importance of regional integration in these different issues. We were not very good on the timekeeping in the first terms of discussion, so I will ask you, because I'm I'll say, responsible of this timekeeping, so just to be a little bit shorter in your second term of intervention, just to keep it short, 2 minutes, in the second point. So the second point I will raise, it's about all these initiatives that are coming around. Yes, there is this big partnership for global infrastructure initiative where the US is key, and there will be around many things for Africa. We have, as everybody have mentioned it, this huge African continental free trade area where we have this big common market without barriers. We hope so in few years, the largest free trade area in the world. Yes, but how can we, as governments of the United States and Africa, including the African Union, move forward to prepare for and capitalize on these and all those other initiatives? So my first question will be for this discussion to President Biden's Special Assistant, Ms. Dana Banks. So how can the US government help in this area? I think there are already some ideas that have come out.
Absolutely, thank you, and I will be brief. I just wanted to make sure that I address the AFCFTA question and theme that came up in the last round. So we are actively working with the AFCFTA Secretariat and the Secretary General located based in Ghana, realize our engagement and provide a structure to our engagement as the United States with the AFCFTA as the vehicle through which we can increase our trade and investment on the continent. So rest assured, those discussions are underway. I've met with Secretary General Mene in Washington, as well as a robust set of meetings from our U.S. government interagency at the State Department and U.S. Trade Representative's office, and we hope to be able to announce something that's finalized during the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit in December. So I want to make that point. And to your other question about other initiatives that seek to address the challenges on the continent as it relates to infrastructure, I'm sure you're all familiar with the Power Africa initiative. And, you know, as we talked about, I've heard this come up a few times, and it's a fact, it's true. How can we increase trade and investment on the continent if there is no stable supply power and electricity? That starts the conversation right there, or could stop the conversation. So, you know, President Obama realized this and started the Power Africa initiative, which has now really, it's one of our largest public-private partnerships for the U.S. Power Africa and how they address the climate and energy concerns that we currently all face. So again, we will have some deliverables announced with Power Africa during the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit. Additionally, some of you may have heard about a Digital Africa initiative that's been discussed, and this is to get at the digital access and connectivity challenges across the continent. So we have a Digital Africa initiative. It will probably not be called Digital Africa because I understand there's another initiative by that same name by another host country, but we are looking at an initiative towards digital to increase digital access and connectivity across the continent. All of these things provide the enabling environment for trade and investment on the continent. So we recognize, we take the lead of our African partners. You tell us what you need, and we will meet you where you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Banks, for this insight on the U.S. government actions on these different topics. Mr. Minister, how you think we can play a role?
I heard something that I heard in the last 20 years from the private sector, and we don't have probably the skills to run a mill or to learn. And as you know, in Morocco, we built a brand new industrial base with a lot of platforms. We didn't know how to run them. And now, we have few foreigners in each plant. But what we learned during COVID and during the flight bans, we couldn't have experts here. And we never had that much investment in industry that we had in this period. And Moroccans could fix the plant, a new plant, in a new sector we didn't have, could run it on their own, and could reach the level of quality quickly than if they had foreign operators, expats being there and having more fun than expertise, and cost a lot, and could reach the top level of quality of this multinational very quickly. 4 months for the average level, 8 months for the top level. Only Moroccans. My king has a nice word for that. Africa must trust Africa. And I ask you all, trust Africans, they are good.
Thank you for that motto. I'll turn to the private sector. What is today the real need from the governments to provide the framework for growth and investment in Africa and to create real value addition?
Thank you again. I think one of the first things that I will mention is a mindset change between the public and the private sector. So gone are the days where we believe that we're going to get all the solutions from government or policies. We, as members of the private sector, we can all come together and we can air, the direct challenges, and then which will support the policy formulation from the government side. So both for the private sector as well as the public sector, we all need to have this mindset change that, we now need to work together. It's not government's problem, it's not the private sector's problem, but, we have to work with government, private sector institutions, multilateral institutions to find the solutions that we all need. It was also very exciting for us to hear the announcement made for the Africa Leadership Summit and the USABF at this forum. It's very important to have public-private partnerships together in the same room where we can then, talk about what the new challenges are. But what is more important, what we would see as help, is to actually institutionalize these programs so that we have them consistently, irrespective of the administration. So whether we have a legal framework for the USABF, maybe it happens every year, and I'm just throwing numbers out there, and the ALS maybe happens maybe every 3 years or every 2 years, but it needs to be consistent. That, again, also reflects the intention and the value that the two governments have. This will certainly really help us because it's dynamic and things change, and we need these regular institutional platforms to air it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gomel?
Thank you. I would like to maybe complement what the Honorable Minister mentioned. 3 rice mills. What I was talking about was 6 years ago when we had only 3. And the Honorable Minister is also aware of the partnership between Nigeria and Morocco country entered through His Majesty the King. By the way, I'm also the chairman of Nigeria's Sovereign Wealth Fund. So we're one of the largest customers of OCP from a phosphate standpoint. And our president and His Majesty the King entered an agreement to stop importation of fertilizer in Africa's most populous country. We agreed to partner to stop importation into Nigeria. And from then on, today Nigeria has 49 fertilizer blending plants. That is fair trade. And that is why I want to conclude towards the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. We have free trade in Africa. Just go to any of the border towns and cities, people are moving up and down. In fact, it's more difficult for you to cross a border with a passport, land border, than hey, I'm going to Cameroon, see you later. You just walk across the line and you're in Cameroon. I'm going to Cameroon with my passport, wait, why? Where's your yellow fever card? Are you vaccinated, etc.? So what we want is fair. And why I'm saying this is are always at the expense of one person, one party, one nation. When Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana decided to work together on cocoa, that was a milestone. Because in the past, one country will see the price of the other country, and then they will move in slightly higher, and then the commodity moves across the border. But if you have a fair mechanism where there is a semblance of win-win, it doesn't have to be, somebody has to win, but let him just win slightly above the other party. I think that's where you will have fairness in trade. And that is why the policy makers actually have to work with some of those informal border town traders to understand the reality. Today, if you import rice into Benin Republic, gravity happens. We don't know how, but that Thai rice or Indian rice ends up in Nigeria, poof. So please, as we talk about free trade, add a small f somewhere in that benefit from. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this new F. But I think it's one of the important points of when the minister said we must trust each other, trust Africa. That's fairness begins by trust, and it's very important. I think all these insights give us many ways of improvement and have provided ideas for collaborative partnership. But still, the objective is really to grow investment, to grow trade. I didn't hear some specific solutions to move forward, specifically in the private sector, because I'm a member of the private sector. I know that as US companies coming to Africa and as African companies trading with the US, there are still many challenges and things to do. Yesterday we've talked about de-risking the Right, I'll come to the minister. They was telling me that the Ghanaian minister didn't talk about it. I'll come to you, Mr. Minister, sorry. So, is there some specific points where we need to improve things to create more investment from the US to Africa? And as private sector, you are in PNG, how can you, what is your position on that? What are the instruments that have been that are needed?
Well, thank you. Today we've talked a lot about the impact of implementing the AfCFTA, not just on the private sector, but also in the multilateral trade systems between the two continents. I can't overemphasize how much that will really. We want to be able to move goods and people easily from one part of the continent to the other. So whatever work needs to be done to actually get into the implementation stage. For instance, I understand things like rules of origin are almost done. I dare say that we actually don't have to get to 100% kick-started. We can start with the 80-20. I think we should really just move towards implementation. Another thing that we see are, regulatory barriers between the two countries. It is very essential to, we cannot, promote trade and investment by working through 54 regulations on a single product, given the number of tariff lines. So this is something as African governments should work on, and we as the private sector, we offer our help, and we are ready to contribute our experiences across the continent to help shape the formulation of these policies. We've had several meetings here during this session, during this forum, that has actually addressed that. So I think it's something that we can drive forward even further. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'm coming back to Mr. Minister. We have talked a lot about these investment initiatives, infrastructure initiative, about AFCFTA, about also the point, the free movement of leverage on all these initiatives.
Thank you very much. Three things that have come up which are very important for our discussion. One is how the private sector engages with government and with the public sector. For a very long time on the continent, there's been some level of mistrust between government and the private sector, sometimes for a number of reasons. There are situations where governments somehow feel threat influencing politics. That is there. But there are also cases where the private sector somehow influences political direction for their own benefit instead of basically doing the right thing and supporting. So on both sides, we've contributed to the mistrust. But we have to move beyond that. And I think as government, we need to do two things. First is to improve the business regulatory environment, identify the key areas that inhibit and constrain the performance of the private sector, and make sure that we address those challenges. Number two, there has to be an institutionalized process of dialogue. It doesn't matter who is minister at any point in time. If there is no institutionalized process, as the Americans will say, it ain't gonna happen. So I think that public-private dialogue, government to government and private to private, ought to occur. Sometimes there are conflicts even between the private sector. The traders have their own agenda, the manufacturers have their own agenda, and they don't come to government with a unified force. So I think that we need to address that. On AFCFTA, I think at the national level, it is very important that each country has a national action plan or program that would enhance support to the private sector to produce. Because let's face it, I mean, AFTA is a wonderful game changer for the continent, but like AGWA, it's only a legislative framework. I was privileged to have been part of the design and negotiation of the AFCFTA. Unless we produce amongst ourselves, there's no basis for that trade. Where the US can support Africa, apart from all the beautiful, wonderful things they are doing, is how to coordinate the interagency and interdepartmental support to assist the implementation of these national action programs for various countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this insight and these views on the two topics. Donc, I will turn to Mr. Gumel. We are talking a lot about, we have talked a lot during these days about AGOA, about all the new initiatives, about the free trade agreements, how to improve the access to the American market and so on. What is your view as things that needs to be done to improve the access to the US market for African companies and also to access to the capital markets?
Thank you. Actually, one of the discussions I had yesterday over dinner is how, as a group, we're looking to diversify by investing in the US. So this is actually an African company looking to go and make investments in the United States for purposes of a growing diaspora there, which is quite exciting. But if you look at US's strength today, from my own point of view, is most of it is in capital, fintech or technology-based issues, as well as financial services. So it comes back to there's a core strength there, and we in the US and many US companies operating in Nigeria seamlessly. But if you look at production-wise, or from a production standpoint, there are also certain strong regulatory hurdles of getting African products direct into the US, African processed products direct into the US. And those are some of the things that we also need to go back and put our own perspectives. It's easier to export from the US to Africa than it is to export from Africa to the US. And we have to find a balancing act on how to get that going. And finally, I was just reflecting on what we did in the last 6 years. We've built around 7 factories in Nigeria. And I don't think there's a single US equipment that went into any of those manufacturing facilities. And I don't know whether it's a strategic intent in terms of the US moving more towards services in terms of African engagement. But if today you want to build a factory in Africa, apart from the key names like GE, who are mostly now into healthcare, most of the equipments are coming from Europe and Asia. And I think the US also needs to realize what industries are Africa doing and where does the US plug in. They have the capacity, they have the competence, and they have the hustle in them to deliver. But as it is now, mostly it's service, mostly it's technology-based, and that needs to change if we want to build this inclusive utopia that we talk about, from an Africa standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perhaps just to complete what have been said and to give some examples, Mr. Mazur, I know that in Morocco there is a lot of dialogue between private and public sector, just perhaps to give some insight of how you are dealing with these issues.
So I agree with my colleague from Ghana. We need a platform, and we have a platform. But the most important is not the institutionalization of this dialogue. It is important, but the most important is that each one does his job. Each one knows where he's going. So we have to, as a government, to lead the way, to see this is what we want. We want jobs, we want value production, we want transformation, we want open markets, we want fair competition, we want less corruption, etc. We have to draft what we want. And the private sector funding, he needs to have the right resources, he needs to have access to public market, etc. He has habit and he has an ambition too. And sometimes the tradition of this ambition is just to focus on local market or on small value or on the ability to create the value they did traditionally, but not, you tell them, like you said, from the private sector, go and buy a company in the US or go conquer a market in Europe. It seems like a mountain for him. And that's why the main word for that is just ambition. You don't you have the ability to market some product, maybe niche product, not mass product, maybe community product, like you said, maybe other things. You have the ability to market what you're producing. You have the ability to market it anywhere with the technology nowadays. So the sky is probably not the limit for anyone in the world now to market their products everywhere in the world in a fair manner, like you said. So access to market, you have some barriers. Discussion between the government and the private sector have to be done, transforming the ambition of everyone, from the governmental part to lead the way, to say this is what I want and this is what I want to transform, but from the private sector too. They're scared, they want protection, they're very conservative, and we need to push a little bit and to make them more ambitious. So the key word is ambition.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Ambition, 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 as you said it yesterday. Okay, Mr. Minister. Okay, that's fine. Okay, I think that we have had many ideas here, many interesting things that are coming out of the discussion, and it's clear that there is a need to strengthen the collaboration, not only among government, but also between government and private sector. And as it has been said by many of the private sector and between private and public sector, there are a lot of challenges we are facing. So just before closing this panel, perhaps some last words on the future, some small ideas we can take away with us. I'll start with Ms. Tope.
Thank you again. I think just continued collaboration and engagement between the public and private sector across all levels, between government agencies, is actually going to help to drive the ideas, which again is dynamic. None of us have been in this situation of the pandemic before. So this close collaboration is what I will continue to promote and drive between the public and private sector. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Gomet.
Thank you. I would once again thank the U.S. delegation and the African businesses that are here today. And I think over the last 2 days, personally, I don't know everybody else, but I've gained a lot, and I think I've seen a lot of opportunities. And I just want to remind our U.S. partners that they remain today the headquarters of global innovation. That is still in their hands. And that innovation has to be sustained. We're here to leverage from that innovation and help in those implementations to pull ourselves forward. And therefore, the U.S. must be encouraged to continue to be innovative, to those innovations become implementable and impactful initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Banks, final remark.
Sure, thank you. Thank you to my fellow panelists as well. I think the bottom line for us is about partnership, mutually beneficial and respectful partnership. Rest assured that whatever new initiatives that come online, they have been developed in collaboration with our African partners. This is how we have operated since the beginning of this administration, and we intend to carry it forward into the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit later in December. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Minister, final words, final remarks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. We are here in the U.S.-Africa Business Summit, and I believe that the challenges of managing a post-COVID economy, global economy, requires the United States and Africa to chart a new path in terms of redefining our relationship. And I hope we can escalate and elevate this relationship to a more strategic relationship. And that, I believe, should underpin our post-AGUA architecture. Putting industry or putting investment, technology transfer ahead in terms of prioritization. The trade would occur if the investments and the technology transfer are in place. Secondly, on the side of the private sector, a lot of iconic US companies have benefited from Africa for many years. Literally all the global US companies. It is their responsibility to tell the story of Africa and let us change the narrative about the continent. This is the only way that small and medium enterprises in the United States can see that Africa is an investment destination of choice. So I believe that on both sides, we have a collective responsibility.
So, to the U.S., to our U.S. partner, thank you for your interest in the continent. And I know for the private sector, U.S. private sector, it seems to be a risky business, and probably you don't see the infrastructure to produce, but the real production, the real go is on talents. I invest as a Moroccan government between $1,000 and $5,000. And I have the best talent recognized in all systems, Japanese, American, Korean, Chinese systems. They adapt and they have the best productivity. And you have 30% of the talents here in Africa. It doesn't need a port, it needs a connection, a bit electricity, but the talents are there. This is immediate. You can gain money, profit, and technology built in Africa. To the American government, a message: if the investment of your company in Africa, I think if we need something, it's just this. Use a tool, a financial tool, to the risk. It won't cost you a lot because it's not that risky as they think. It won't cost investment to transform your relationship and your trade relationship with the continent and to the public and private sector of my continent. Ambition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. I think that it's clear that there is a call for action, the call for revisiting this partnership between public-private, between US and Africa. And I think that as we all have heard, we have some near events coming, and the most important will be this Africa Leaders Summit, US Africa Leaders Summit, and also for us, the Business Forum, which will be held in December in Washington. So let's all commit to come there with strong proposition to solidify this cooperation between US and Africa, this partnership between the US and Africa. So as we will take the final photo of the panel and take our seat, I'll just ask you to have a round of applause for our esteemed guests who have really given all the ideas. No, it's okay. Thank you so much. So just, we'll take a photo and then
please, if our panel members can retake seats in the plenary hall, and if our guests would all remain in their seats for the vote of thanks. Please take your seats so that please join me in welcoming to the podium the Honorable Dana Banks to commence the vote of thanks portion of the closing ceremony. Please join me in welcoming to the podium the President and Chief Executive Officer of Corporate Council on Africa, Florie Lizer.
Well, let me first express my gratitude to His Highness King Mohammed VI for his high patronage of the 14th U.S.-Africa Business Summit here in Marrakech, Morocco. God bless you, Your Highness, and all the people of this beautiful and welcoming country. And to our excellent partners and co-hosts, the government of the Kingdom of Moroccan Affairs, the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and the Moroccan Agency for International Cooperation, as well as the Moroccan Agency for Investment and Export Development. We have worked without rest, especially these past few days. And by working together and collaboratively, we have overcome many obstacles, solved many problems, persistently with unwavering resolve to make this the best possible summit ever. We have valued our work together to advance the interests of the United States, the Kingdom of Morocco, and indeed all of Africa. I must take to CCA's Board of Directors, to the member companies of the Corporate Council on Africa, the representatives of all over to participate in this summit. And I want to say a special thank you to the summit sponsors, It was my plan to try to read the names of every one of them, and then realized it would take me probably 5 minutes to do that. So they promised me that they would put the screen up. So I'm going to wait for the screen to be put up with all the sponsors of the summit, people from Morocco, companies from the US. And I should also mention our media partners as well. But again, to read the sponsors, this could not have happened. Could not have happened. And last, but certainly not least, to the entire team of CCA, my colleagues, my wonderful colleagues. Your esprit de corps, your energy, your creativity, your commitment to excellence is just outstanding. I don't know if you know that the Corporate Council on Africa staff, there are 10 of us. That's it. So I don't know if they're here, but let's give a round of applause to the CCA staff. Now, as we prepare to conclude this highly productive 4 days of the summit, we must be resolved to not just make this a catalyst to strengthen the partnership and drive for greater U.S.-Africa trade investment and business partnerships, and for equitable economic growth for the people of the United States of America and the people of Africa. We at Corporate Council on Africa welcomed the announcement by Vice President Harris that the United States government will be hosting the Africa Leaders Summit on December 13th to 15th of this year. It was such an incredible and welcomed that Corporate Council on Africa looks forward to working with and seeing all of you at the Africa Leaders Summit and the U.S.-Africa Business Forum in Washington, D.C. in December. Until then, thank you so much.
Please welcome the Honorable Dana Banks to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Flory. First, I would like to start off by also thanking His Majesty the King for his patronage to this event, and really just the warm welcome of the Moroccan government to all of the U.S. government delegation, the companies that were here. From the very beginning, I felt the true spirit of the hospitality of the Moroccan people, so thank you, and I will be back. I would also like to thank, in addition to Flory Lizer, I think she deserves a round of applause. Can we please give Flory a round of applause? It's amazing that she and her team of only 10 were able to put together such an amazing event. Thank you, Flory. Thank you to the CCA team, to the CCA board and members for hosting such a wonderful and I think productive U.S.-Africa Business Summit 2022. I would also like to thank the members of the U.S. delegation who were present with me here. We had representation from all of the 17 U.S. departments, U.S. government departments and agencies who comprise the Prosper Africa presidential initiative to an investment with the continent. And I think, and in addition to some 40 to 50 other members of the U.S. delegation, I think that robust delegation and presence and engagement from the United States government and the private sector demonstrates the commitment of the United States to the continent of Africa. Last but not least, I do want to just say a few words about the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit that Vice President Harris announced in her message in the opening plenary here. It was really a very exciting moment because that not just the announcement, but the work and the organization of the summit to allow us to be able to announce it earlier this week really has been going on for quite a while. And we look forward to continuing to work out the agenda for the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit. President Biden and Vice President Harris really look forward to hosting the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit from December 13th through 15th in Washington, D.C. The President's announcement further underscores the importance of U.S.-Africa relations and the Biden administration's commitment to revitalizing global partnerships and alliances. We expect to engage a wide range of African and U.S. stakeholders to really illustrate and say, we talked about innovation and creativity earlier, and youth leaders, and most assuredly women, all of these actors are essential to tackling the shared challenges that we face that abound, that are rich in Africa. So we look forward to seeing you there as part of the U.S.-Africa Business Forum that I know CCA will collaborate on working to organize, as well as the U.S.-Africa Leaders Summit in Washington later in December. Thank you so much, and safe travels.
Welcome His Excellency Minister Riyad Manzoor to the podium.
Well, all good stories have an end. It was an amazing summit. It was very good to have you here under the high patronage of His Majesty the King Mohammed VI. May God assist him. I would like to thank first the Biden administration and the U.S. government for their support to Africa. To the 450 U.S. companies that make it to be here and that showed their interest in Africa and that showed their investment intentions in Africa. Thank you, to give them an applause too. 50 African countries took part in this summit. 6 foreign affairs ministers, 20 sectorial ministers. Thank you for some of them that are still with us today, and thank you for your participation and your contribution. It was really appreciated. Thank you very much. 80% of the participants are from the private sector, 80-20, and this shows are making business now in Africa. More than 5,000 contacts and meetings, 5,000 contacts and meetings, and baby projects, let's call them like that. And we hope it will transform in real projects, in jobs, and in trade relations, because we need it in the US and in Africa. Well, ladies, you performed. But we still have to work. 40% of the participants were ladies. I need an applause for that. We signed several contracts between companies, and 250 international medias were here too to cover it. That means sexy, interesting. Thank you, the media. Flory, you looked amazing with the kaftan. Thank you for the CCA, and a big applause for the team and Flory. I would like also to big applause for Ambassador Metral and his team from the MC. They did a great job. And last but not least, a big applause for my team and my Secretary General, Musharraf. I hope you enjoyed it. It's the start of a new story. We have a lot to do. We'll follow up on that. Enjoy the rest of your stay in Marrakech. Thank you.
Let me just, again, on behalf of our partners and co-hosts, the Moroccan government, officially closed. Thank you so much for being here and being a part of the 14th U.S.-Africa Business Summit. Yeah, I thought he was going to say something about the lunch. Yeah, he's supposed to say.
This concludes the 2022 U.S.